Hey,
Hey,
that's Jazz. This is actually a La La Land podcast.
Oh my gosh.
No, we're not going to get into that.
This is not a Basic and Paula podcast, nor is this Jazz with JD and Jmike.
Dang it, Jmike, we
This
have
is a
another
Superman
podcast. We have another
podcast, damn it.
to start. Damn it.
Let's start the show. Podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike Folson.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here.
I know. we had to hold us off on this one because of stuff, and yeah. I've been waiting to get to this one because we just stopped in the middle of our coverage of the death and return of Superman.
I mean, it's a lot though. So
yeah, well, we got through a lot, and now we are back, and I'm excited for this episode because today we are talking about the animated adaptation of The Reign of the Supermen. And for that conversation, we are joined by JD Martin.
I'm back, fuckers. Still the reigning champion of most guest spots. You can't take it away from me. You can't take it away from me.
Tied, thank you. We figured that out with Duke, and as a result, I've been making sure to pair you guys or have you matched in counts, which is why Duke did the death and you're doing the return.
No, Duke can't take this away from me. I will come back. I have ideas.
There's going to be a SmackDown or Man of Steel Raw.
Oh, God.
Well, JD, thank you for coming on. That's regardless of any of that. It's great to have you here for this conversation because I was really excited to come to this video eventually. When it was announced, I was like, oh, that's cool. They're actually doing the 4 Supermen. That's a pretty cool thing that they're actually putting in an animated movie because we've gotten so many versions of the death that just didn't bother. And the characters people really care about honestly can be agnostic to the actual death cycle. Superboy and Steel both work fine if you don't have a death and return cycle for Superman. Superboy worked just fine in Young Justice as a clone that was sort of spawned, and Steel, I mean, hell, Steel doesn't even really require Superman. He can be just a standalone character sometimes, or at least people think so. Shaquille O'Neal thinks so. But this was exciting because when I actually watched the death part, I was blown away at how good it was.
It was really good.
And I was extremely enthusiastic to see how this side of it lived up to it because I was like, wow, they really nailed all the things that I had minor complaints about the comic version of the death because I think it's a better story than people often give it credit for. And the animated adaptation just blew it away. And so I was really excited to look at this and then really excited to chat with the two of you about it. So my question before we get into anything about the actual movie itself is, JD, what is your association with the death and return of Superman cycle, the comics versions, and then these animated ones? Where are you coming in terms of your feel for this particular story and how it's been told?
So I have a feeling that at one point on this show, I might have said I did read the comic, but that is actually a fib. I don't know. I guess I just got caught up or something, or I probably misremembered, but I haven't actually read the comic. I've just never really been drawn to the death of Superman just because. So my first introduction to the story at all was the Superman Doomsday animated movie, which I think is for a lot of people my age is probably the introduction we all got. And I remember watching that movie a lot when it came out on DVD. I watched it quite often. I rewatched it for the first time after many years last year. And even though it's not particularly a good movie, it still made me cry because I'm still watching Superman die. It's still hard to watch. So I don't know. I never really wanted to go toward the comic just because, there was always this kind of mixed reaction that people always had or surrounding that comic. And also just the idea of at this point in time now, the death of comics are kind of old hat, I guess. There are so many different death of comics. It wasn't even the first. There was the death of Captain Marvel over a decade before. And since then, there have just been so many more. I mean, I think just last year we had the death of Doctor Strange. So it never totally fully appealed to me as the comic. And honestly, I rewatched Doomsday last year kind of on a whim just because all the animated DC movies are on HBO Max. And after watching it, I decided, what the hell, why not watch the death of and reign of Superman movies? And I honestly really love them.
Nice. I mean, the comics are definitely caught up in the sort of reputation of like big events of the 90s and like a lot of the grimdark stuff, and it becomes associated just as much as like Bane breaking Batman, and they all get kind of seen as like, here was kind of a thing to drive sales.
Yeah.
In an era of comics that like were still coming to grips with just what comics could do as the Comics Code Authority was being relaxed, and as the medium was changing to embrace things like creator-owned properties, things like Ninja Turtles, or the big rise of Image, which happened right after this, but you could already start to see the shifts in terms of like what kinds of stories people were telling in comics. Shortly after this, we get things like the rise of Vertigo and all those kind of comics. I mean, like you are covering Sandman over on Fables and Reflections. And so like this is all part of similar conversations that are happening in terms of like, well, what can comics do? What kinds of stories can you tell? What people are working on what? And while I think that the strengths of the death and return of Superman cycle are that they are a commentary on the comics of their era by the creative staff, it's certainly still an event of that era. Like it still has limitations, and you know, Doomsday is a plot device that gets like 6 issues just to beat people up. And it is difficult to make that really, really interesting. And so like the things that they're doing that are like kind of creative are, you know, format stuff, like the reduction of panels, versus then like the movie. I was blown away by just having really good choreography. Like I was like, oh, right, movies can do a thing that make it interesting to watch that has nothing to do with what a comic can do. Because like, while you can have cool panel layouts and you can have very interesting fight scenes, the actual movement itself is still being implied. And so that was like, oh, hey, this is a fantastic thing that we're doing. And then you get the return, and what is the commentary in 2019 about an event that was now, like literally while we're talking about this, in the midst of its 30-year anniversary?
Has it really been 30 years?
Yeah, it started in December of 92 with the first appearance of Doomsday, and then ran into 1993.
Oh, God.
I turned 25 in April.
Yeah, so it's an event that's 5 years before your birthday.
Yes.
For me, this is like talking about like the original Contest of Champions or Secret Wars, like some event from 1979. Like, wow, it's just such a different time point.
I think I was 4.
Yeah,
right.
I think I was 4. Yeah.
So
Hooray.
I unabashedly think that the death of Superman animated movie is just like a straight up upgrade to Superman Doomsday.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
With the exception of one shot that is in the Superman Doomsday, which is when you see Doomsday's vision and it's like a computer readout of a thing. I thought that was really cool. That one shot is the thing that I'm like, oh man, I really wish that was brought over. But the rest of it was just like, oh,
yeah,
they did a really good Doomsday. He's really scary.
So even though like we are here to talk specifically about Reign of the Supermen, having not been on the Death of Superman episode, there's still certain things I want to mention from that movie. Because of course I rewatched that one before watching Reign this morning. And I remember like I do cry, or I kind of tear up when Superman does eventually die, because it is a very heartfelt moment of Lois saying, I got your note, I love you too. But before that, with the kid on the bridge,
Yeah.
and Superman saying, like, you know, go back to your mom, son. And like the kid giving him a hug, like that is a pure Peter J. Tomasi moment right there. He and Patrick Gleason had a wonderful Superman run with like big highs, some not so good lows, but those highs were fucking soaring, were amazing. And it shows in that script that he wrote for that movie.
Yeah.
And then you come over to Reign, and different writers. This time it's Jim Krieg and Tim Sheridan writing this one. Like still with that beating heart that Tomasi had. Like it was still very much brought over from what Tomasi did in Death.
Yeah, but I mean, they do act as 2 bookends to a story. Like it was effectively doing a 2-part story for what Superman Doomsday was trying to cram all into one movie. And like that room to breathe is appreciated definitely when looking at this project.
Yeah. We talked about this when we did the All-Star Superman movie, in that one came out before they started doing the 2-part movies.
Right.
Which is like All-Star Superman definitely would have benefited from a 2-part movie or just a longer movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because after that we got like The Dark Knight Returns got a 2-part movie. And it's cool that that's getting a 2-part, but why aren't other maybe more fun stories that are larger in scope, why aren't those getting the 2-parters? And ultimately, of course, it's in the title, Death of Superman. Like, it is wrapped in sorrow because we are seeing the death of the greatest superhero, but there is still optimism and hope in there because of the rise of Steel by Superboy defying who he was created to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone in the wake of Superman's death just saying, we are going to mourn, but we are going to push on and we are going to live up to the standards that he set. And that doesn't just go for the superheroes, that just goes for the everyday people that he inspired and he interacted with daily.
Yeah, there were great elements in the death, setting up all of that future, setting up Bibbo, like, to be a stand-up guy, setting up all the different, like, Hank Henshaw's wonderfully established in the Death of Superman. Both Superboy and Steel, they do such a good job of being like, yep, this is what's going to be coming in the next movie, guys. Eradicator, less so. Like, they establish him, but he kind of comes out of nowhere in that movie, and as a result is kind of carried over into this movie also without like a lot of baggage or a lot of weight. So why don't we actually get into this movie and talking about our thoughts on it? Mm-hmm. Jmike, so you have been on this journey with me. You had seen this before, right? Like, before we started this whole sequence?
Yeah, but I'd watched it once or twice before, but it was always with the first version of Superman Doomsday, which I didn't really care for because I didn't care for it. Then I watched the newer updated version of it like last time for the episode, and I was like, oh crap, this is actually really good. This is really freaking good. And I watched this one again yesterday, and I was like, okay, I can see where a lot of this stuff ties in. I don't care for a lot of the reworks they did in this version, like saying Doomsday was a dark side creation. And I was like, no. I was like, oh, you were doing so good. Come on, guys. Come on.
I don't know. I kind of like that.
I don't hate it, but you know what? All right, cards on the table. I like this movie. I don't love this movie. I love Death of Superman.
Yeah,
I cannot
really
get over how good that was. This one, I don't love it. I like it. There's fun. A lot that I think works really well. Yeah. You know what this movie fucking feels like? It feels like a fucking Power Rangers episode. With Darkseid being Rita Repulsa,
no.
Which is fine. Like, that is the role that they can play sometimes in terms of setting up stuff. But the fact that like Doomsday and the Cyborg Superman are both plots by Darkseid make this all feel like very much like, I can't wait. Make my monster grow. I have the Putty Patrol, which is my like Cybermen that are just kind of floating around everywhere.
Yeah. Oh crap, that is true.
I cannot believe you put that in my head. It's never going to leave my head. I'm honestly like not mad about that.
Which one's the real Red Ranger?
Shit.
Oh man.
No. Damn it.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
And like, it's fine. I'm just saying it's not as strong as the first part was, because the first part took a story that honestly I thought was never going to be interesting enough to be a full movie. Like Doomsday, I don't think Superman Doomsday, ever tried to be the whole story is about the fight with Doomsday, because it seemed like they ran out of steam and were like, okay, that's the middle of Act 2, or maybe even Act 1. Like, okay, cool. Let's get back to him coming back to life. Okay, that's the main story. Fuck. At least it's paced out that way. Like, the Supermen don't matter enough in this movie to me for it to be really their story or have them feel like a big part of the story.
Yeah.
And that I think kind of bums me.
This feels more like Lois's story.
Yeah, which is fine. It's just not the reign of the Supermen at that point.
Yeah.
Like, the thing that I really liked about the comics, and we talked in great detail about this on the last 2 episodes, was that it starts off where like we are spending a solid amount of time with each one before the stories start to intertwine with each other and become a singular story. So for the first 2 issues in each of the books, that's their book. And there's like their own supporting cast and their own story arc that's going on, and it only starts to come together after that point. Like, while Superboy cameoed in Steel's story, it was still very much like, this is the adventure that Steele is on with that supporting cast, and there's a cameo by this other hero. Likewise, Guy Gardner showing up to deal with the Eradicator. Like, that was just cameos, but it was still like their book. And then after you get to that, past that 2-issue mark in each of them, all of a sudden the storylines start to directly impact each other. So like events are directly continued in the next issue of a different Superman book that was coming out the following week. So it became a week by week story. And that I thought was refreshing, that we spent that time first with each of them, so we cared about them and had their things. I can't tell you what the fuck the point of the Eradicator in this story is.
He got so downplayed in this movie.
Like, and I like a lot of what they did with the Eradicator. I like him being a hologram. Spoilers for like, who cares? Like, he's a hard light.
We're deep into this episode. It's okay.
He's a hard light construct, and I thought that was so fucking cool. It was perfect for why he does laser blasts for like his main attack. Like, everything about that was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Kryptonian technology having like a Jor-El hologram. Yeah. But honestly, it should have been just like Jor-El at that point. Like the hologram mind for Jor-El going out there trying to save the day. That would have been really fucking cool. But like, as it is, it's sort of like, well, why is he like so
aggressive?
Yeah, like, why is he doing anything like that? Why isn't he just like the puppet for Superman to control or anything? Like, what is his deal? Why is he so aggressive? I get him being aggressive when Steel comes in and being like, I have to protect Superman, but why is he out there behaving the way he does when we have no setup for why, like, what that personality is coming from? Because it's not like it's Calyx.
I think honestly the ideal version of Death of Superman and Reign of the Supermen is as a miniseries.
Yeah.
Because that way you can actually like do like after the death, do an episode on how the supporting cast is doing, how the League is doing, how Lois is doing, how are his parents or parent, if they decide to do, you know, just the one parent, how are the people that he interacted with every day, and then have the reveal at the end of that episode being, you know, the tomb has been exhumed, someone is in the sky, and then the next 4 episodes we follow each of the 4 Supermen and give like a full episode to each of them to really follow what they're all about. And then like the next 2 or 3 episodes, like following the ending of that story.
Yeah, I think that's the strength that the comics actually have. I think that the death of Superman was kind of the perfect length for that particular encounter. Like, that story already felt a little too decompressed. Like, it was a little too Dragon Ball Z. Like, oh, the planet's going to blow up in 5 minutes.
Is it 5 minutes? Later. Was it 5 minutes?
Exactly.
30 episodes. Who knows?
And that was kind of perfect for the death, but we didn't get the world without Superman phase. And we've already jumped fairly far into all of the imposters are around.
They said 6 months, right? I think it was 6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, 6 months.
But regardless of like the time that they tell us has passed, like, they are firmly established as out there. They've had their adventures. They already have their respective supporting casts, and they're doing their thing as established characters. So we are never being introduced to them. We're being caught up to them. And likewise, like, the story kind of like jump starts like a bit further in, because this one I felt should have been more. Whereas the first one was like, that's the perfect runtime for the story they're telling. This one was like, oh, this could have been the 2-parter.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, this should have been a 3-parter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can roll it out and then
like
actually have the Supermen start to show up somewhere in the middle of it, and then you can spend some time with it. So again, Eradicator, I feel like, well, what's the point? You could have easily not had him in that story at all, and it would have been mostly fine, aside from the MacGuffin of how do we find the Fortress of Solitude, which you would have just come up with some other thing where it's like, we need to figure out a beacon for whatever apocalypse technology is going on. Oh, that's a weird energy signature. That's not apocalyptic. That's Kryptonian. It's in the Arctic. And then they just travel to it, and you get the same story. Like, the Eradicator's only there because he's part of the original 4 from the comics and doesn't really do anything, which is kind of a bummer.
He has 2 fights, I think. That's it.
Right. And he's certainly strong, and like, they get the design down, and like, sure. And it's like, yeah, it's cute to have him be the one to destroy Henshaw at the end. It's like, how do we fight a robot? Like, okay, we use a different robot. Like, okay, cool.
Eradication.
Right. Yeah.
You sound like a weird Dalek. Eradication.
Meanwhile, Superboy is already linked up with Lex Luthor and working for Lex Luthor. And it's weird only when you stop to think that he escaped, and that there's never a point where it's like, well, why did he come back to Lex, or why did he get wooed over by Lex? to be working for him that way. In the comics, he's on the run from Cadmus and like fully like trying to avoid them because he doesn't want to become a lab experiment. And in this scenario, he's just like completely gone right back to them. But he definitely escaped because if he wasn't an escaped Superman clone, then they would have grown him up to full age.
Or like in the case of Young Justice, where he was broken out and then like kept having dealings with Cadmus and then just eventually was like, I have to face them at some point because there's unanswered questions about myself.
Exactly. And I like some of the design choices for Superboy. I like that his eyes look like Lex Luthor's blue eyes instead of Superman's blue eyes. Like, that's a subtle difference right there that works by having
the light blue instead of the deep blue.
Yeah, like that's a really nice detail there. We get good use of Ma and Pa Kent still being alive so that he can settle with them as Connor at the end. That's appreciated. Like, I like his design. You know, at the end of the first of Death, it looks like he's going to have the New 52 look, like the black costume with like the red accents. And instead, he's wearing much more like his original costume. But I like the black pants. I think that actually works really well on his design.
I miss the boots and the original jacket. It was badass, man.
While we don't get the big red components of the costume that the classic Superboy outfit still got to engage with, I thought it looked pretty good. Like, I immediately clocked the Lex Luthor icon on his jacket. I was like, that's weird that he has that. That's strange. And then it's like, oh, he works for Lex Luthor. Okay, that's we're already there. Okay, cool. I thought overall, like, his arc is mostly fine. You know, him trying to be like a celebrity and whatnot it's cool enough. And he's legitimately like a character that we expect to behave that way. I enjoyed that all the lines he thought were cool are programmed in him by Lex Luthor and Dabney Donovan, who are not cool. And so like all the things are like also 20 years out of date.
Yeah, Luthor has that throwaway line of Dabney's been letting you watch those 90s sitcoms again.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
and actually, that's kind of like a nice touch of like, we're adapting a story from the 90s. So we're going to have 90s sitcom lingo here because someone likes the 90s sitcoms.
Yeah. And it allowed us to have the exact moment of when they're all going off to face the cyborg Superman and he's like, slam it. Yeah. And it's like, do people not say that anymore? Because that is exactly what he said in that same scene. So it's like, oh, it's nice that we get to have the same line, but now it's like, man, that line hasn't aged. Like in universe that we can actually like look at it being like, oh yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah. Honestly, I think of all the Supermen, everything going on with Hank Hinshaw is really great just because he has his little setup in Death and then like the slow realization, like if you haven't read the comic, like I have, like the slow realization that the cyborg Superman is Hank is really great. And then Steel, like everything going on with Steel is great.
Also, two things. Mercy needs to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. She has been through too much shit.
Mercy
that poor woman
needs to retire. She's like, thanks for what? This clack. And then how does no one recognize Lois Lane after all these years? Because Dabney was like, hey. And I'm like, Lex has to have posters around the offices and like, hey, avoid this woman at all costs.
Oh, you know for a fact
if you see her, report her immediately.
But Dabney is such a piece of shit that like he doesn't care.
It's like, how? She's like, oh, hi. I'm like, clearly everyone should know it's Lois by now.
Also, we have to answer the very important question. Did Dabney deserve it?
Oh, the what they call Bizarro clones at the end?
A nice nod, by the way. Does Dabney deserve it?
Nice
yes,
nod.
Dabney always deserves whatever comes to him because Dabney's a piece of shit.
Exactly. Okay, I just want to make sure we were on the same page there.
I want to push back a little bit on saying that like Henshaw and Steele are both like great because I have like minor issues with both. Like,
did I say great? I just meant they were good.
Okay, so Steele,
I get caught up.
I really like the setup of Steele being in the first one. I think that works really well. I don't love that he just has straight up an Iron Man setup.
Yeah, he's like, okay, dude, you've been doing this for 6 months. You need to chill.
Like he's got straight up like the Avengers 1 like take apart Iron Man sequence there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's my one bummer because like what I liked about Steel, and admittedly he's not doing the same thing of being like laying low and like building the armor out of like scraps, but in a basement, not a cave. Like, so we are losing that element there. And so sure, he's got better tech because he's like actively working for LexCorp.
I like the working man aspect of Steel from the comics.
Right. And I kind of miss that.
It's kind of lost in this movie. Yeah. It's lost in this movie a bit.
Like, why does he have the hammer? We never get into the John Henry stuff. Like, sure, if you're smart and you know that John Henry is the hammer guy from folklore, like that's all there. But like, it would be nice to have some moments like where we kind of contextualize that. Like, he is fine, except it's like, oh man, like he's just a little too advanced. Like, I wish that he was putting it all together. Like,
Like, just go back to steal from Superman the Animated Series. Like, the way they did that was great.
I mean, even if it was just pieces that he had to like put on, like the fact that he's got like a disassembling machine was just like, oh, it's too much Iron Man already.
Yeah.
Which is just like a minor issue on that one. And then then he's like pretty fine after that point. It's like, I like that Lois is like immediately knows who he is.
Yeah. Also, she's like moonlighting as Batman, sneaking people's houses and stuff like that. She's like, oh, you left your window open. I was like, wait a second.
I mean, Lois Lane is just a better Batman.
Apparently so.
I mean, she's the only one that Batman knocks on the door for.
Oh, she saw him in the lab too? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who scares the bat?
Yep.
Lois Lane.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Hank Henshaw, I thought they kind of revealed it too fast.
Yes. That was my second major issue with this movie, because she shows up at the gravesite and she's like, oh my God, it's Hank Henshaw. I was like, that's a giant leap.
And specifically, they reveal it too fast because then his plot doesn't really start until after that point. Like, I think that we should have had little bits of hints. And then, like, honestly, the people should have all started to be made cyborg putties before that point. And then we find out, oh, no, it's actually not Superman. It's actually Hank Henshaw. They don't really try to sell you. In fact, they flat out don't try to sell you that what he's doing is the right thing, which I think would have been helpful for his story to, like, have more of an arc to it. You know that he is working for Darkseid before you even get to like the start of this whole process. Yeah. And I think that a reveal that, oh my God, it's Hank Henshaw all along, and that he is being controlled by Darkseid, and already he's in a position of power that way, would have been a bigger twist on that whole thing.
Yeah, and I think this is where we get into like, maybe this would have been done better either as the 3-part movie or a miniseries.
Yeah. That said, I like Hank Henshaw's power levels. I think it works really well to have him he's not quite as powerful as he is in the comics. Like, he's not able to control all machines. He has direct reasons to control like the cyber guys, and he has like control over his robot body, and he can interface with stuff to control it. Like, it was a good scaling on that power level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to wrap around back to the Eradicator thing, where he's been going around stealing LexCorp weapons and things.
Yeah.
And that didn't really go anywhere.
Aside from being like, here's the tracer for it. Like, sure, taking it out of like circulation is a perfectly fine choice.
But he like sets it up in the fortress as like an armory for Superman.
Not a terrible idea.
And I was like, okay, I guess. But then why did he go around stomping people out just to take their weapons back?
Right. Yeah, the Eradicator is wasted. The Cyborg works well as a specific, like, okay, we've got our villain and he's working for Darkseid. I really like once he starts to go crazy when Superman comes back at the end. I think that works really well. Mm-hmm. Him like ripping out the parts of Darkseid's programming, like, that's really good. I like that like a lot.
Yeah, honestly, like, watching this, I was also realizing, like, wow, this is getting, like, full anime here. Like, how characters are animated, especially Hank. Like, he's going full anime villain here, and I was pretty into it, actually.
Yeah, that was really good. I get Darkseid being the master planner, but again, like I said, it kind of makes it feel like a Power Rangers episode, and it kind of makes this feel like just a footnote in a larger series about Darkseid's war with Earth, and...
Mm-hmm. It's like the whole New 52 thing where he's everywhere.
Right. Yeah. I don't love Darkseid being the sole reason for anything happening in like the DCEU. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like, I believe this was supposed to lead directly into Apocalypse War, the Justice League Dark movie.
Right. Weirdly, if Superman was a new god, I would be more okay with this being a Darkseid plot. As it is, because he's his own thing, like there's separate mumbo jumbo. I kind of wish that there was more types of mumbo jumbo in this universe. Like, it's all right. Well, not Cyborg Superman. Cyborg, like the Justice Leaguer is also Apocalypse Tech, and so we've got that going on there, and we got to deal with the Justice League, who also could have just been out of action because of Doomsday. We didn't need to have this whole like, we're gonna set up a faux invasion that honestly didn't hit the world the way I wanted it to. Like, while yes, it's devastating. Oh my God, we just lost the Justice League. I kind of feel like the destruction of the Justice League should have been more like Coast City. Like, I think that we should have had them taken out of action in a way where things are way more desperate. Like, the Justice League all dying is very sad considering that Superman just died, but there actually isn't that much fanfare to it. It doesn't come across as like the whole world is fucked, and that is why the cyborg Superman needs to step up and make the world safe.
But like Batman had already mentioned that there were already other teams out there too.
Right. Like, the text of it says that, but we don't see the world that way. Like, Metropolis looks fine, where it's like, all the robots are keeping the peace. What fucking peace? Like, the world doesn't look that bad.
It's just like another bright sunny day in Metropolis.
Kind of, yeah. Like, it's like a little too utopian. Like, if the world was like really hit by some kind of dark side invasion that we saw and when they save Hillary Clinton and like go from there, because like
that was Hillary.
I mean,
what?
Like,
That's good. No way.
Like, as soon as like the first husband Bill was there, I was like, all right, guys. Like, I love this inverse. I mean, it's so funny because, like, well, it's not unrealistic to be like, oh, yeah, I guess Hillary Clinton would be the president now. And then look back at the 90s stuff and it was Bill Clinton, like, there for all those scenes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Bill Clinton literally speaks at his funeral in the comics.
Oof. Okay.
It's just wild, the difference in time and everything. But, like, if everything was really fucked up by that, and it's the Cyborg is like, okay, shit's really bad, but I'm going to make things better, and we thought that he might be Superman, like we didn't think he was a pawn of Darkseid at this point.
Yeah.
Then he starts making like the world like ordered and so forth, and then it's like, oh shit, he's actually Hank Henshaw and he is a construct of Darkseid. That would be a different thing. Like, you could have done that where he's like looking around the city and like he sees Darkseid and like freaks out for half a second. Have that be Doomsday. Sell us as it is PTSD, and then find out that Doomsday is the conduit for how you create Cyborg.
Yeah.
Because he is. Like, Doomsday crashed into his ship, and that's how, like, you end up with Cyborg Superman. So, like, you could have some trail of logic there. Or you just have, like, literally Hank Henshaw has PTSD because Doomsday killed him, which is also what happened. So it's, like, that would work fine. And sell that he might be Superman to us as an audience. I think that they give up the ghost too quickly. And so we're like, all right, well, I guess they'll find Superman eventually and everything will be fine, which is what happens.
Also, I got to talk about Rainn Wilson as Lex Luthor.
Okay.
I got to talk about it because I don't like it.
I kept on thinking, like, so it's Dwight Schrute, and that's like,
I don't like it.
Yeah, like, he's okay at the role, but when he tries to come off as smug, it comes off as not quite there. Like, and part of it is
he comes off as shrill
a little bit, yeah. And I just heard him so much as Dwight, thinking that he was the smartest man in the room, and not actually being the smartest man in the room. That, like, nothing really about this movie sold me that he is the smartest man in the room.
Yeah. And honestly, like, made me kind of miss James Marsden's from Superman Doomsday. Because, like, I think it's just, it comes down to his voice being a little too high pitched. I am, of course, used to Luthor having a deeper voice. I'm used to that Clancy Brown pitch, but you can still go with a higher pitch. He just needs to have more authority and, like you said, like, actually act like I am the smartest person in the room and make everyone believe it. And as much as I enjoy Rainn Wilson, he just didn't quite sell it.
Yeah. And we spent too much time with him. And I get it. It's because he's supposed to be then a bigger player in more stuff going forward and has been a bigger player outside of this. And it's the era of Lex Luthor being a little bit more, like, might actually be, like, key to us, like, saving the day kind of character versus, like, other renditions where he's a little bit more background or he is purely a villain kind of thing. It just felt like most of the time when we were dealing with Superboy, it was really an excuse for us to deal with Lex. And I get that it is narratively convenient, but again, it feels weird that Superboy immediately sides with the people who created him rather than being afraid of them or trying to avoid them or latched on to some other group.
I think everything regarding Superboy and Lex in this movie, in some form, was done better in Young Justice.
Yeah, 1,000%. Also, like, I realize that I vent about not liking the retcon that occurred to make Superboy Lex Luthor's biological son. I think it can be done well in some places, and I think Young Justice does it really well. I think here, because it is fine, but then when he's working for him, and it's like, I gave you every advantages plus my intellect, it really felt like just like Thalog from Gargoyles. Yeah. But not successfully like a villain, which is also kind of a bummer. Like, he's dumber than both Superman and Lex Luthor. And as a result, like, oh, it doesn't quite feel like a proper clone of either. And he's not really a clone at that point.
Back to the drawing board.
Yeah. I feel like we're kind of driving at the point that, like, This movie is good, it's fun, but unlike with Death of Superman, where that was the perfect length for that story with a perfect structure for that part of the story, this needed more room to breathe. And while ultimately still being fun, we needed more time with certain characters, maybe even dropping other characters to give others room to breathe, and also just giving the entire story as a whole room to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, because like we had the perfect opportunity with the Justice League taken out of action to spend some time with like the Eradicator actually like doing something, and it doesn't do anything in this whole fucking movie. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, you don't even need to take the Justice League completely out. Just have parts of the movie showing like, oh, the Justice League are off dealing with this thing or that thing. You know, some of them are off world, some of them are out of the US doing other things, and like, you know, only one or two are ever really present in the US anymore. Batman's of course always going to be there, and like maybe one or two others, and you know, have that be an explanation of like why the League isn't as present, because as Wonder Woman points out to Lois, like, the League is stretched thin. Well, show that they're stretched thin, and then that then leads us to getting more time with the Eradicator, with Superboy, with Steel, with Hank.
Yeah. Also, why are they teleported to just some random dimension where they can breathe?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Like,
Why is Batman there without like a breathing apparatus? And Aquaman is there. What the hell?
If a boom tube falls on you, I feel like you should end it back up at Apocalypse.
Yeah, like if they were doing a whole Uprising story and that was kind of like this like A plot that we're not even bothering showing, like if it was like Escape from House of the Mummy Part 2 from Venture Brothers, where it's like the A plot we just keep cutting back to, and instead it's relegated to like a D plot in terms of scene length, and then the minor side story, like, well, back at the Venture compound, in this case, well, back with the 4 Supermen, like kind of thing, where like this whole time the Justice League is like leading an insurrection inside of Apocalypse, and like at the end of the story they like show up with reinforcements.
Yeah, they're all decked out like as if they jumped straight out of death metal. So like Wonder Woman has a chainsaw and shit. Like, that would be really cool. Honestly, I like that better of them. Like, they do go off, but then we do cut back every once in a while, like, and we're gonna cut back for 5 seconds to show you like, hey, they're leading an insurrection here.
Right, because otherwise, why didn't the boob tube take them to the sun?
Yeah, like, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense. They just, oops, it fell, and oh no, we're trapped in some other dimension where everything is trying to eat us. How did we get here? Oh my gosh, it seems like you guys just need to get rid of us for 5 seconds to get us out of the way.
Yeah, and again, like the fact that they're treated as dead by the media, and that should be a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And like, while there are lines about it, the general sense of the world doesn't really matter. And what we haven't talked about yet is the Bibbo Rebellion.
Yeah.
Because what the fuck was that? Like, what did they think they were doing? Like, they gather at his bar and it's like, yeah, all those guys, well, right now they're just flying around keeping the peace, but eventually, like, they might try to like
eradicate us.
Yeah. Eventually things are going to go bad. We got to go fight them. And what? Like, first of all, what chance do they have? Obviously none. Like,
I understand the Bibbo is normally not the smartest man in the room. However, he is smarter than that.
He's got a lot of heart.
He is
right. It's not, there's no plan, and it's not even like we're going to go hit these guys or attack this place or protest at this location. And like, I'm all for advocating for protesting against like the official peacekeepers if they are actually not doing their job appropriately. Yeah. I think that is perfectly fine. You could get into interesting conversations about things like the Black Lives Matter protests or stuff like that. But that's not what's going on in this movie. For one thing, it's a little early in terms of like the popular zeitgeist really appreciating all that. And for another, they don't have a fucking plan. Nope. Like, what are they goddamn doing?
We're going to go down there and shout really
and
loud.
Throw rocks.
And even doing that, why does the cyborg care? Like, it's just a bunch of random people on the ground. He has a flying base.
Flying death machine.
Yes.
Because at first, like, it makes it seem like they're in like a little help. Like, remember, was it Endgame where Cap's in the in like the self-help group thing, and he's just sitting there talking? That's what I thought it was going to be.
Honestly, that would have been great. I would have loved to have like Bibbo leading like self-help groups. That would have been cool.
Mm-hmm.
They also didn't get the win is the other side of it. Because it's like, oh, here they come. It feels like, oh, we're assembling our militia to like stand against an onslaught. Like, the protest could be fine, but they kind of just should have been ignored until things like went bad with Darkseid's plan, like when the cyborg Superman like pushes it, and then yes, it's like, oh, and here they come, they're like attacking us. Like even then, like whatever role that they serve should have been like, oh, they knocked out a power grid, they knocked out a thing that's like participating in this all. There's some reason why the ire is drawn to them, so that like the cyborg even gives a shit about them specifically, and not just like eradicating them from orbit. Why are the Cyber Squad people like flying in there and engaging in a fight? Why isn't it just like, oh, we're just going to start mowing down everyone? Like if the tragedy of these people not being able to stand up to super threats, and like that's why Superboy and Steel have to get in there and like start saving the day. Like also cool. It's just like weird tactics. Those moments where it's just like, it's all too simple. Like, why are you standing there fighting when you could just be blasting them from a distance or dropping a car on them from a distance or doing anything? Like, when the tactics don't make sense for the reality of it all, it's like, well, why are you doing it this way? This doesn't feel like how this would actually play out. And it just feels uncreative. And that's like kind of the bummer about the third act there. Although I do generally like the third act a lot.
I will.
Yeah. There are those small moments that I really love peppered out throughout this movie. One of them being toward the end when like Lex brings the Justice League back and they're like, wait, Lex, you did this? He's like, I only did this as an investment. Like, don't get it twisted. I'm not on your side. Like, yeah, that's the real Lex shining through right there. Being the smartest man in the room, like he is going to realize like, shit, we do kind of need them right now. I hate it, but we've got to have them at this moment. But I will give them shit once they get here.
Oh man, the little banter they had before while they were guarding the motorcade was kind of fun too. And then Superboy shows up.
You're welcome. God.
Green Lantern's like, I got the shot.
Batman, I say take it. I'm like, I'm with Batman. Take it and get this movie toward the third act quickly, please.
Cyborg actually did have a good line, unfortunately, where he was like, so all cyborgs supposed to know each other.
I did appreciate that mainly because like in the 90s, because Victor Stone was like kind of taken out of action for comics, like it was just the Cyborg was the Cyborg Superman. So it was nice to like see the juxtaposition there. It is fascinating that like Cyborg has become like, oh, I can't open a boom tube now. Like, oh, you're the fucking team teleporter now, in addition to like all the other stuff. Like, I never think Cyborg should be a Justice Leaguer. He's supposed to be a Teen Titan.
He's supposed to be there. And I will never forgive them for doing that switch.
Or rather, he's okay being on the team. I like superpowers. Like if he's a new member, but he's young. Like he should feel like a rookie.
That's why I like him in Doom Patrol. He fucking rules in Doom Patrol because he's the one who's like, I'm a superhero. I know how to be a superhero. And then like the Doom Patrol is like, dude, you don't know the first fucking thing. You're a freak just like us. And you got to embrace that. There are specific versions of Cyborg I love. And I think like that or a Teen Titans version are like my two favorite versions of Cyborg.
Yes. Teen Titan Cyborg is awesome.
Absolutely. 100%. Booyah.
Yeah. So I like this movie, but exactly what you said, JD. It needs more space to breathe. We didn't really spend much time with the respective Supermen. We didn't really spend much time with the world after the JLA is neutralized. And like, I like that as a device to like make it so that Superman has to come back and save the day. But there doesn't seem to be much of a plan. It's too quickly like, okay, well, I'm just going to go confront him. And like, somehow he wins. And it's like nice that Lois is part of that. Like that's all good. The way Hank plays it, I think are really good moments. Like when Hank is like trying to be like, the rule of law must be obeyed. And like, is really trying to sell it that he's Superman. Like that's good. I didn't get how Darkseid was able to replicate Superman's DNA. If he could. We never had a moment in the comics where it's like, it's confirmed that all of this genetic material matches Superman's. His aura is the same. So I was left wondering, like, especially once we saw the Cyber Squad, does he actually have Superman's powers, or is he apocalyptic in tech?
I thought it was Apocalypse Tech.
Yeah. So is he flying with like anti-grav stuff that like going on that way, which, you know, could be cool if they explain that as well. Just so, you know, just for the fun of it. Like,
he could.
Like, oh, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
They didn't really get into...
And that aids in the investigation of, like, them scanning him. And it's like, well, he's not actually using the way Superman usually flies. Like, he's using this technology. And, like, that, like, leads them down the path of this actually is a Superman. Who actually is he?
Right. But at that point, then they're all basically robots aside from Superboy.
Well, I mean, they didn't really get into Superboy's powers either.
Yeah, I miss the TK. Like, he definitely just has Superman's powers, but weaker. And they did have some good moments of him, like, using super speed. It's fine. It's like, it wouldn't make sense for him to have tactile telekinesis on this Superboy because he is just a clone of Superman with Lex Luthor's DNA. But he also is more powerful than like Young Justice Superboy, who has like the Golden Age Superman power set. So I don't know. It's like, I miss it, but it also just plays up that like Superboy is just like less interesting here than he is in some other versions.
Yeah.
And Eradicator being just a hologram construct, which I like that part, is cool. But then he's also an artificial being. And then if Cyborg Superman, which interestingly was both robotic stuff, which is what we're getting in different levels from Steel and the Eradicator, and then also replicated DNA, just like Superboy. Like, that's why Cyborg was like so powerful and so scary. And while I said that I like his power levels in this movie, I am curious if he's supposed to actually have Superman stuff going on. Like, if it's entirely Apocalypse tech, that's cool, but it should be a mystery, like you said, Jmike. Like, it should be like part of them figuring out, oh, he's not actually Superman. And if he actually does have Superman stuff, I would like an explanation for how that is. Where is it? Because like, you're missing a story opportunity one way or the other.
Yeah, because she just figures it out in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, that's not
Lois.
That's
not
fast.
Lois. Lois, like, she's an investigative journalist. She is going to go full sleuth. So there's got to be a full mystery for her to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Especially because she says she's the worst at figuring out secret identities.
Exactly.
And she figures out all of them.
Instantaneously. I'm like, come on, guys, you gotta give her something to work with here. Not like, oh my gosh, I'm at his wife's gravesite. It must be Hank Henshaw somehow.
Dun.
How do you know that, Lois? I don't know. I have a hunch. Great. Figure it out, please. Give us something to work with.
Yeah, although it does make sense once she has Steel as an ally for them to start figuring out things really quickly. Like,
yeah, but
that's good. But yeah. One thing I thought was interesting was at the end of the movie, it's an excuse for them to switch over from the New 52 design for Superman to the Rebirth era Superman design. And I do like the Rebirth era design. This is actually the time where the New 52 costume coming out would have made sense.
Yeah.
Like, come back with Kryptonian armor kind of design would have been appropriate. And it just speaks to how much I don't like the New 52 design, unless it's like the perfect artist on the perfect moment kind of thing. Like, it can work in exactly right spots, but I just didn't really like it in the movie before. And here it's like, if there was ever a time for me to like it, it would have been like at this moment. And then instead they go with a more classic Superman costume, which I do like. I prefer. It's like, oh, you're going to go less Kryptonian in your design after you actually get in touch with your Kryptonian heritage.
I don't know. At the end of the day, just don't do the New 52 costume.
I feel like I'm in the minority here, where I actually enjoyed the New 52 costume.
It can work, but it just requires very specific artists.
Instead, do the Mikhail Hanin Superman in the Authority costume.
Oh, well, yes. Daddy Superman would be the way to go.
Exactly.
I'm still looking for it. Are we going to get that outfit somewhere?
We better get that outfit.
One day.
James Gunn, give us that costume at some point. Put Brandon Routh in that costume, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I always like to see the black costume at the right moments. Like, obviously, it shouldn't be his default costume, but it works. It's a healing suit. I enjoyed all that. The Eradicator's story makes more sense in this than it does in the normal comics. I will say that part. That is all good, because it's like, oh yeah, the Eradicator woke up and it's like regenerating his body, and never once thinks he is Superman. Like, Eradicator always knows that he is not actually Superman. He always speaks about Superman in the third person because he is not Superman. He is just an avatar for Superman. So I like those elements there. But yeah, man, just too much crammed in here. That's just what I keep coming back to. It just, this needed to breathe a little bit more.
Oh, the whole thing with Martian Manhunter and pretending to be Superman at the end. I found Mr. Kent. Walked away, far away.
I like that a lot, actually, because it was like, oh, he's a bad actor, and that part's nice. And also, it makes sense because, like, in the comic, it was Matrix, and Martian Manhunter and Matrix have, like, basically the same powers. So it's like, okay, cool. Logical transition right there. That worked really well.
Yeah. It always makes me happy to see how they're going to put, like, how are we going to have Superman and Clark in the same location? Like, how do we figure that out? And, like, I'm trying to remember which version I remember watching of Lois asking him like every situation of like, well, what about this moment? What about this time? What about that time? And Clark just like shooting back of like, it was Batman that one time. It was a clone. It was this.
Oh yeah,
that's All-Star, but I forget if it was in the movie or if it was in the comic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. It was All-Star.
It's definitely in the comic. I can't remember if that exact scene happens in the movie, but like they both like. But it's All-Star Superman where it's like, what about that time? Oh, it was a time displaced duplicate. Oh, that time. Oh, it was a robot.
Yeah, of course it was Morrison. Duh. Yeah. Morrison would have that conversation.
Yeah. On that note, I do really like Jerry O'Connell as Superman, and I do really like Rebecca Romijn as Lois. I think they worked really well. The stuff going on there was good. I really liked Rebecca Romijn dealing with Rosario Dawson as Wonder Woman. Like those were some good scenes right there.
The New 52 shenanigans.
Oh, thank Hera. I'm not good at this kind of small talk.
So good. And then getting ice cream, and then Wonder Woman gets to do the spin.
The spin.
Spin. Yeah. That was so cool. I love that.
Yeah, and I think when she spun, she didn't have her hair in the ponytail, which is a thing that broke in the death of Superman. And what's nice is that this is being used as a transition from New 52 stuff to not New 52 stuff. Like those were good choices in terms of like getting away from all that.
Yeah.
But again, like the dark side plot just kind of overrides this whole movie. And part of the reason why you kind of have to do that is that like this universe is not as rich of a series of adventures of Superman. Like he hasn't made all the foes.
Yeah.
Like the Eradicator, Hank Henshaw, and Mongol all are separate threats. And the Eradicator and Mongol are tied together, but like totally separate things that went on in Superman's life. So when you get to where it all comes together in the Death and Return comics, we kept on saying it's a victory lap. It's everything post-crisis we are going to shout out at some point. So the Cadmus stuff, we are going to shout out. The underworld people, we're going to shout out. We're going to shout out the weird aliens he's encountered and the Fantastic Four parody he's encountered. And like, really the only thing we didn't get was like Mr. Mxyzptlk. Like everything came from somewhere in that comic. And this had the task of doing all that with fewer MacGuffins to go off of. So it's like, all right, well, we've got Darkseid and that's fine. Like Darkseid and Mongol, honestly, are very similar characters. Like Mongol is a ripoff of Darkseid, so it's cool. It did seem weird where it's like, this is my new apocalypse. I'm like, why the fuck does Darkseid care? Like, I get it, the anti-life equation, yada yada yada.
He's got one apocalypse already. Why does he need another one?
But you just end up with like, after 10,000 years, I'm free. It's time to conquer Earth. Like,
10,000 years can give you such a crick in the neck.
That's exactly where my mind went.
It's that whole New 52 thing where they're trying to fit Darkseid as like the big bad lurking in the shadows, just waiting to get his hands on Earth.
Just for him to turn around and be like, Finster, make me a doomsday weapon.
It's like they don't even like say that the anti-life equation is there. I don't think. I never got to the New 52 stuff that much. But like,
you don't need
he just wants to conquer Earth for some reason.
There were some good lines that I liked where he said like anger and hatred are part of the equation. I thought that was a really good line in there. There's some design elements I like in general, like that.
Hate and sadness leads to the dark side.
Well, like that was like nice to like hint at the anti-life equation. Obviously they went with like the Donner movie style Fortress of Solitude. And I liked how the ion bath that they used or like had like a crystal design that looked like the Donner rocket from Krypton, but then we had the more like Silver Age design for the rocket that he actually used and was in. So it was nice that they were doing these like fusion components. And then we had like the 90s style, like Calyx style, like Kryptonian droids. So good fusions of the different eras of Superman design stuff. Those were good. Again, I like a lot of the designs for the characters. Like in general, like all the Supermen looked pretty good. I think the Eradicator was over designed. The accent work of his like the yellow bands on him. But you know what? He's
fine.
Like hologram design, it's fine. I didn't get why he had a visor, like whatever. Like
did he have a visor in the comics?
Yeah. He had the visor in the comics.
Yeah.
But in the comics, his eyes were super sensitive.
Oh, true.
So like, why does the Eradicator look like the way he does? Like, shouldn't he look like a hologram of Superman? Maybe like energy form Superman.
Yeah. I think their reasoning might have been like he is supposed to look like the hologram that you see in Death of Superman. And like that hologram that you see in that movie, he is wearing a visor.
Yeah.
It's very faint. So they're probably like, oh, like we're going to have like a character here there who's going to be the model for the Eradicator. So like the very flimsy in-universe reasoning for the visor.
Yeah. Now that I suggested, I can't stop thinking about like if it was the Jor-El hologram. actively like out there, that would be really cool. But then no one thinks it's Superman, or maybe they do because Jor-El looks like Clark, but like that would have been like kind of a cool detail there as well. But instead, it's not quite there. It's good. It's just, it doesn't have enough room to breathe. Like, they've got some good design work and that's all cool. But like, they have these narrative conveniences to get things like really moving. They want to do the Lex Luthor having control over Superboy story. And so he's already under his thumb, even though it's like, well, how did he get there? Like, you feel that like, that's a story we didn't tell. And we get like great moments. Like, here's the exact covers from some of those comics are like on the newspapers and whatnot. And like, that's all very fun and like good. But like, again, we just like jump to like, now we're in a police state where there's like flying Supermen that like the cyborg Superman's controlling, and people are like, maybe this is a good thing. And there's no real discussion until you get there. Like, it's just like very fast sequences of events, like big time jumps are kind of occurring here. The thread with that like couple, the one guy who like became a cyborg, like a cyber squad, superhuman samurai cyber squad character. Like, I like that detail. I like the fact that he's dead at the end. Like, I thought that was kind of good from the standpoint of being like narrative stakes to this all. Like, oh, how tragic is Darkseid's play here? But the world is not shown to be fucked up enough at the end for all of this. Like, again, we kind of needed Coast City to be destroyed. We kind of needed things to be in a bad state. We kind of needed Cyborg to really do a lot of damage to Earth under the guise of being like, I'm making it all safe and Kryptonian, and it's actually all apocalyptic tech. And like, he was setting up Darkseid, and now Earth is permanently like marked by Darkseid. And that's why we go into like the Justice League going to war against Darkseid at the end. Like,
we kind of need a brave new Metropolis almost.
Kind of, yeah.
We keep going back to Superman the Animated Series because that show is just so damn good and did so many good things.
Yeah, like that's where we should have ended, or with Cyborg's story, before they like revealed him to not be the real Superman and position themselves to battle him. Like, the third act should have been like, oh my God, it's never been Superman. It's always been Hank Henshaw, and he's always been controlled by Darkseid.
Dun, dun, dun.
But we kind of just know it too well at that point.
Yeah. Like I kept saying, probably should have been a miniseries.
Yeah.
But hey, that first movie rules.
Oh yeah, Death of Superman, it's awesome.
That's a wild part. Like, I never thought I would be like, man, the death of Superman, that shit's where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I watched that and I'm like, I'm gonna cry every time. Can't not do it. Just because, like, it's a wonderfully complete story, which is kind of insane. It's like, this is still like the beginning of the story, and yet it feels like a complete story here, peppered with beautiful moments.
Yeah.
I don't think we could have fit Coast City and all that shenanigans into one movie.
Not the full scale, but like the Darkseid attack, the launch of the Watchtower should have been like more devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he should have actually come through.
Yeah, it could have been the equivalent of the Coast City events or something to that effect.
I feel like they tried to play it off by saying all those people died, in quotation marks. Did they really die, or they just kind of like passed out in the ground?
Well, they appeared to be
dead. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're all dead.
Yeah.
It's like they were falling from the sky and like no one helped them, and the Justice League guys are kind of like looking at them fall like, oh, are we supposed to do something?
I apologize. When you said falling from the sky, my immediate thought went to the movie Robots, when Rodney's like, there should be people rioting in the streets, and then there's a riot in the streets, and then Bender's like, oh my God, you're fantastic, my friend. Now say, money should be falling from the sky.
Oh yeah.
Everyone go rewatch Robots. It's a good movie.
It's a fun movie.
Well, yeah, everyone should go rewatch that. I would say watch this movie at least once, maybe twice. I liked it more the second time, frankly.
Yeah, for sure.
I watched it. I do like this movie. I know I've been coming as down on it. It's just, I was so blown away by Death.
No, we haven't. We've been nice.
I feel like it's a movie that is fine to good. Like, it's a B- movie. Mm-hmm. And like, there's a solid place for that. I just couldn't get over that Death was so good. Like, Death was a solid A as far as doing that story. And so I'm a little bummed by that part, but it's still really fun to look at and see how someone could like compress all of that stuff down as much as they could and not have to deal with the death part, because like having that be its own thing is still useful in terms of how much story you can actually tell. The fact that we do deal with Steel, and it's a pretty good Steel, and we do deal with Cyborg, and it's a pretty good Cyborg, and they do deal with Superboy, and it's an okay Superboy, and then they don't do the Eradicator, but like they felt like they had to reference the Eradicator. Whatever. Like I would have liked a little bit more there. Would have liked a little bit more of a story for Superboy beyond just being like, I have to get away from my corporate overlords and also my dad. Okay. Steel would have been nice if we had a story for him to do that wasn't just like dealing with the other Supermen, but like it was a perfectly fine Steel that was set up pretty well. So like that's all good. Lois's real arc. Yeah, exactly. It's just you have to work to make Steel not Iron Man, and this movie didn't do that work. But it's okay because they're very similar characters, but like they just didn't like distinguish him just enough.
Well, I mean, remember in the comics he was off doing his own thing most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't. Really,
he had like a real story.
Yeah,
like,
what was it? But the bunny lady.
Yeah, White Rabbit.
Yeah, White Rabbit. Yeah, he was off chasing after her the entire time. So he didn't really interact until like the end.
Steel was just chasing the White Rabbit. Sounds like a code for drugs. Yeah, they gave Steel his own story because it was very clear that he was his own character. And they never dealt with, like, is he possibly Superman? Whatever. Not the point, guys. And Superboy was, like, lighthearted romp stuff, and we don't get any of that either. Mm-hmm. And then Cyborg and Eradicator were both like, are they the real Superman? And that's what this movie kind of wants to deal with. Although we all know that it's not really Superman. Like they don't really try to fake you out on either the Eradicator or the Cyborg Superman. And that's kind of the bummer that those comics did try to fake you out. And so that felt like their story. And this one doesn't do it enough.
Yeah. I think ultimately what they should have done was like take Cyborg Superman and take it until like the last like 15 minutes of the movie that you until you think that he is actually Superman. Like, yeah, because of course there are going to be people, you know, like Case and like many others who have read the comics and know the story, and then like direct that more toward y'all, in that like making y'all think, wait, are they not gonna do that? Are they actually gonna make Cyborg Superman the actual Superman and like really fake y'all out? Because then that's gonna be hard for everybody that way. Yeah. Because like the way you could have faked it out is if you made very clearly the Eradicator a Kryptonian intelligence that was activated upon Superman's death from the Fortress of Solitude and like from his rocket, like that you make it so it's very clear that this one's not Superman, and Steel and Superboy are their own things and we don't have to worry about it. And then kind of fake out so that you think you're from the Cyborg's perspective. Like you see him kind of wake up as Superman and being like, what happened? And like have flashes of Doomsday. Mm-hmm. And like you think you're in his head. And then it turns out that he's Hank Henshaw, who also died by Doomsday. And then that some of the things that those moments where the machines are kind of controlling him or whatever, you could believe that that's him dealing with like the robot body or the Kryptonian intelligence stuff, because he should be the rocket ship and the Cyborg should be the fortress, whatever. It doesn't, you could make it so that we're really being led to believe that the Cyborg Superman is Superman reborn in this fucked up face in this terrible way, and he's trying to deal with his life and everything, like all of his memories are broken because it's a movie. So like you can do those kind of flashes of his perspective and have it be ambiguous and like really, because it could be like programming that Darkseid put in to make him think that he's Superman, so that like when John Jones meets him, like he passes like a psychic scan, like he certainly believes that he's Clark. Like you could go with shit like that, and then you can fake it out and be like, oh, actually he is not. He is in fact a drone created by Darkseid to be in this position, and some of those memories are real because they're from human DNA that was like mucked with, and then you get there.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. Yeah. Would have been cool. They don't do enough with it, and it's a bummer, but it's still pretty good. Like it's definitely worth watching. It's just not as great as The Death of Superman, but I would say check it out, and then like check out the comics, because they do actually have a really good time.
Yeah.
Like spending energy on those respective characters, and you get some really cool art.
Yeah. Read the comics and avoid those weird miniseries in between. With the alien bug things.
Don't look at the annuals. Like they're not worth it at all. Like just full stop, not worth it. You're fine without it. Also, read half of the issue of Green Lantern that ties in, but not the other half, and do whatever you can not to like give kickbacks to Gerard Jones. And yeah, that's it's fine. It's all fine. Like, are we ever going to get like a perfect version of the Reign of the Supermen? I don't know, because like the story is also was of a particular time and place.
Yeah. And also we keep talking about like there are aspects of that story that have already been told. Like we keep going back to Young Justice of like Superboy and Lex and Cadmus. Like that story's already been dealt with to death in Young Justice. Like at this point, I feel like maybe in like another like 20 years or so, we'll get a new version of Reign of the Supermen. I don't think we're going to get another one anytime soon.
I hope not.
Yeah.
I think we're good for now.
Fine.
Yeah. Like I think we're good for now.
This is fine. I'm not hurting for it.
No.
Well, I think one of the things that always got me after sitting down and reading all the comics for this show, all like the Death of Superman, Return of Superman, is that how many storylines left from this story to go across the stuff in the DC universe.
Mm-hmm.
Because directly after this story, you get Emerald Twilight. And all that goes down with Green Lantern.
Oh, yeah.
And this causes that. You're like, oh, how did that happen? Oh, well, they blew up Coast City in Return of Superman.
Yep. And Booster Gold losing his like future armor happens as a result of Doomsday. And so he is stuck basically being an Iron Man type character for a while that Ted Kord is making the armors for. So that's a big shift in the character. And Emerald Twilight has a direct impact on Guy Gardner, who had already been kicked out of the Green Lantern Corps at the time, but he still had a Sinestro ring. And at the time, Sinestro rings were only powered by him fighting Green Lanterns. Mm-hmm. And so when the Green Lantern Corps is gone, he all of a sudden loses his power source too. So he's out of action and has to become an alien human hybrid who's able to grow machines out of his body parts for a while called Warrior. Because it turns out that he is part Voldarian. Yeah.
Just a little bit. And he's a dick, as always.
And then there are stories that grow out from Superman's return. Like he has this whole story where his powers like grow well past like his Silver Age levels, and he has to like go off into space because he's turning into like a weird energy Hulk. Yeah. And he fights Massacre, which is Doomsday, but like a space Doomsday.
And we eventually get Case's favorite, Kyle Rayner.
Right. Yes, we do get Kyle Rayner, who is a great Green Lantern and rivals Alan Scott. Like those two go back and forth for which one's my favorite Green Lantern. But I do love some Kyle Rayner. Yeah. JD is showing off a statue of Kyle Rayner right now.
Yeah.
The animated series version.
I have 4 Green Lantern statues / Funko Pops. I have 4. You can tell I love Green Lantern.
Well, and Green Lantern directly connected with the story back in the day, but barely in this one. Like, while Hal Jordan is present, like, it's not like there's a big story as a result of Hal Jordan.
Okay. Also, even though it's, again, not the movie we're talking about, can we talk about how great the Justice League meeting is in Death of Superman, where they mock Batman going to essentially a parent-teacher conference?
Oh, yeah.
That was amazing. Just flash you like, I am Batman. Like, we need chaperones for prom. Who do I need to intimidate? And Flash's like,
are you going to the PTA?
Are you on the PTA? Please tell me you're on the PTA. And just Batman like,
I hate you guys.
I hate you so much.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we looked at this, and I'm glad that this is a very succinct way of doing a lot of the big story beats. I think it's definitely good if someone wants to get caught up to speed sufficiently that they understand like the broad strokes. But I would say this is an area where the comics actually get to breathe a bit more. And so those are cool to check out. And they're readily available on DC Universe Infinite. So like, I think if you like this movie, you probably should go just check it out, because it's like kind of fun to see Superboy have his own adventure before it's his own book. And like to see the Eradicator be like fighting to like regain like who he is and like understand like what he is. And the Cyborg to have a weird story where he saves Bill Clinton from terrorists from a generic like hybrid state of Iran and Iraq. You know, they happen in there, and there's some fun stuff going on. Steel Story is like just is fun and crazy, and it's weirdly down to earth and very specific book that feels kind of like a Golden Age Superman book, but with armor, and that's cool. Like there's fun stuff to check out. So if you like this, go check that out. I think if you read the comics and you're curious how this is, also worth checking out. Again, it's like really cool ideas for some stuff, and then some stuff feels glossed over. So it's give and take on that one. But it's not the only adaptation of the Return of Superman that we're going to be talking about. So, JD, thank you for coming on for this
Absolutely.
one.
I'm so happy to be back. I'll come back for every episode that you named me for. Every single one.
I am sure we will have some for you soon. We need to keep you in that competition for number 1.
It's not a competition. I am the top.
I swear, next time we're going to see JD with, like I said, he's going to have a belt over his shoulder.
I'm going to make a t-shirt for myself now. I do have a Men of Steel t-shirt. I'll just modify it. It like
here comes Duke in the back with a steel chair.
All of a sudden, you just see me and I just have Duke in a chokehold. Just like, it's like, hey, welcome back to JD. Like, yep, I currently have Duke in a chokehold. This is not us being on the episode together again. This is me showing my dominance.
If his face never gets up to a microphone, he's not technically on the episode.
Exactly. It's a technicality.
Well, but again, thank you for coming on for this one. This was a lot of fun to look at. I honestly, if I went into this movie with the expectations I had before I watched Death, I would have been like perfectly satisfied. This would have been like great.
It's just the Death
it's only because Death is just so good. It's so good.
Peter Tomasi, man, what a fucking great writer.
Yeah. Jmike, any closing thoughts, particularly about this adaptation for you?
All cyborgs don't know each other.
That is true. Yes.
That is all.
They could have done a binary code joke, but they didn't.
This was a fine movie. I like it. It's not my favorite, but it's fun to watch. I really like Lois Lane, although she pokes fun at herself a lot, which is pretty fun. Yeah, this is like I said, it's a good B-. I'll give it that stamp of approval. B-. Hooray! Yeah.
And I will say that from the standpoint of just quality in its type of medium, this is better than what we're going to be talking about next time. Because next time, and that isn't to say that I am not excited for next time. It's just, we got to be honest about the level of craft into each thing. Because next time we're going to be continuing our conversation about the death and return of Superman, specifically because we will be looking at the Super Nintendo game, The Death and Return of Superman, with Matt and Geoff, our former and current editors for the podcast, also hosts of the Fun and Games with Matt and Geoff podcast, so we can be talking about the video game. So that's really exciting. And actually, we are going to be doing a streaming that will have already happened by this point on their Twitch channel. So check out the recording of that, because Twitch lets you go back and look at old streams. So if you want to check it out, we're actually going to watch Matt play through, because unfortunately Death and Return is a single player game, but that'll be happening the Saturday before we record this episode. So we will be dropping that in the CPOV Discord. And like I said, it's already happened at this point. So we're just saying out loud the things that are yet to happen for us. And then we're going to record an episode the following day. And ideally, we will all have played it. And at minimum, we will all have watched Matt play it. Mm-hmm. And it's a fine Super Nintendo beat 'em up.
Yeah, you keep saying fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's not top tier Super Nintendo beat 'em up. So that's a big part of it, which is that this movie is not top tier DC animated, but it's actually pretty good. Like, I would say in the pantheon of DC animated movies, it's on the upper echelon. I would say that like The Death and Return of Superman, the game, is like very dead center in the list of like Super Nintendo beat 'em ups.
You're very generous.
I think that there's some really good stuff, and we'll talk about that next time.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, next time we'll be talking about the game. It's going to be an interesting conversation with Matt and Geoff about that. And after that, I think we're finally fucking done with The Death and Return of Superman.
What? We're not going to do a Wonder Woman thing?
I mean, we kind of did. We did a lot of episodes here. So, JD, if people want to find you, follow you, where can they? Give your plugs.
I'm over on Twitter at JD_Martin_ because there's a lot of JD Martins out there, apparently. The podcast, Comics, Quests, and People's Reflections still exists. There's all those episodes right there. Maybe they'll come back. We're working on things. I think right now the main thing that we're working on is we're working to get our tied to the wonderful podcast Busted Limes with Paresh and Arman. We're getting Busted Dice hopefully out there at some point. It is a TTRPG play-by-play podcast that we're doing. I'm a player on the first season, and tied to this podcast a bit, I am playing like the Superman analog, almost like there's like a family of super people. I'm like the legacy character of the teen superhero team. So we're working to get that out in the world as soon as possible. The following season should be one where I will be DMing, which is going to be very fun. So look forward to that. Hopefully within the next month or so, I hope, is when we're going to start launching that.
Fantastic. I mean, everyone should check out all the projects that you've worked on, or the ones, I mean, all the stuff that you do is, typically speaking, evergreen. So certainly worth looking at regardless. Some really great episodes, some really long episodes on things like Watchmen, and all kinds of other great stuff.
Go back and check out that 3-hour episode of Watchmen with Case and Jmike. It's where I also had to cut an hour out just because I wanted to look up a quote from a fucking book.
Yeah, that took a while, but it was fun. It was a really great chat, and always love chatting with you. Jmike, I also always love chatting with you. If people wanted to chat with you, where can they find you or follow you?
Oh man, people want to talk with me? That's great. You can find me on that website that is still around somehow. Twitter at jmike101. Hurry, because I don't think it's going to be around for much longer. So
I know, it's a miracle, right?
It might implode. Who knows?
Like, we were all making preparations, like, and being like, oh, I guess this is gone. And then not quite yet.
I think people are just kind of there just to see it all burn down from the inside. So.
It's really surreal. I am currently watching it burn over there at Case Aiken, and the show can be found at the burning site at Men of Steel Pod. But you can find all the stuff we're working on at certainpov.com, including links to our YouTube page where I do the Superman analog videos, or where you can see animated clips from this show and from my other show, Another Pass, as well as some of the other projects like side quests. Again, you can find that at certainpov.com, where you can find tons of great shows like JD's shows, like my shows, like all the stuff that we're working on. It's great stuff. You can find a link to our Discord server where you can interact with us directly at a place that is not going to just burn down spontaneously. Who would have thought? So you can check that out there. Again, there's a link at our website. Come talk. We really enjoy having comics chats, and the comics chat channel in general has picked up a lot of speed, particularly since Keith and Josue from We Have Issues have become regulars on our Discord server, and their other show, Jukebox Vertigo, joined the podcast network. So that has been a lot of great times. So check all that out. And until next time, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folson and Case Aiken. The show is scored and edited by Geoff Moonen. And our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken.
All right, now it's time to record the Megamind episode.
Hello, wonderful listener. Pat Edwards here, co-host of the Let's Rewatch podcast on this very network. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an author and a game designer. Specifically, I work in the tabletop role-playing gaming industry. Well, I recently co-founded a production studio called Storyteller's Forge. Our first big book launch has arrived. The Black Ballad is a brutal and bloody TTRPG adventure that answers the question, what happens when the heroes die? Easily adaptable to multiple gaming systems, including 5th edition D&D, The Black Ballad is the perfect campaign to start after a total party kill. We are immensely proud of this epic tome and have assembled a stellar team of collaborators. The Black Ballad features a soundtrack by Dia Morte, downloadable NPC audio snippets recorded by Carlos Ferro from Gears of War and Assassin's Creed, and some truly gorgeous illustrations spearheaded by our art director James Masingo from Borderlands 2 and Shadowrun. Our crowdfunding campaign goes live March 7th on BackerKit, and I would be grateful beyond measure if you would consider ordering a copy of The Black Ballad today.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.